Hey, today I'm going to run you through the new Xero CSV export feature that is built into CrewCall. This lets you automatically generate invoices in the Xero accounting software straight from CrewCall. Let me show you how. You can see over here on the left we've got an iPhone running CrewCall, and on the right we've got a browser that has got Xero open. We're just using a demo company in Xero just for this example. If I go over to Jobs in CrewCall, you can see here that I've logged a job. The job's name is CrewCall TVC and the production company is Cinematic Films. I've logged it as a first AC with an 8-hour rate of $1,000. You can see down here that we've got our single time rate, time half rate and double time rate. And if we have a look in here, we've logged 4 shoot days from Monday to Thursday, with each day being a different set of times. If we jump into the shoot day and go over to equipment, we've logged a whole bunch of different equipment. On shoot day 1, we've used a 703. On day 2, we used a Cine 13. So we've got some varying gear going on here. I've also, if you jump over to notes here, on shoot day 3 and shoot day 2, I've just logged some mileage here, which is made up from, a few different travel times coming through. Now, in terms of turning this in CrewCall here into an invoice in Xero, it's very simple. Let me show you. If you just go back to the Jobs tab and then tap and hold on the job, you can press Create Document. Now you've got your normal options up here like Report, Timesheet, and CSV. Now this CSV is using the CrewCall template. What you want to do is click on that or tap on that because you'll be using a phone and select Xero Accounting. When you're in Xero Accounting, it's going to export for your entire job, and you have a few options here which I'll run through later. You hit Create and your CSV is generated. So the file name of the CSV is here. And on your phone, you'll see options like airdrop and send via text message, etc., or save to files. So basically, you just want to send this to your computer or wherever you're operating Xero from. Because I'm running in the simulator here, it basically goes to a strange place. So I'm just going to move that over into this temporary directory I've got here called demo. And basically, that's the equivalent of airdropping from your iPhone to your computer. Now, basically in Xero, once that's done, you go Business, Invoices, and then you select Import up here. Now, what you want to do is import your sales invoice. So make sure Xero is selected and then select Browse. In Browse, you're basically going to just select that file that we just created in CrewCall, the CSV, and then hit Open. Now to select Import. Xero will check this for a moment and then it will tell you 1 new draft invoice will be imported and 9 new items will be created. Let's hit Complete Import. Now you can see here you've got your list of your invoices, and we can see we've got our reference, which is CrewCall TVC. The reference is using the job name, and we've got Cinematic Films, which is the production company. If we click in on that invoice and let it load, you will see that we've got all of our line items organized here neatly. Straight from shoot day 1, shoot day 2, shoot day 3, and then we go through and list all of our gear individually. And then we have our mileage listed there. So if I go preview invoice, you can see here we are. There's our invoice directly from CrewCall. What you have listed here in CrewCall in terms of your role and your department, that will determine what gets filled in the item code here. So it's saying that you're the first AC, you're charged single time on shoot day 1 for 8 hours at that price. You had a 30-minute lunch break. That gets noted in the description, and it will go through and do your overtime for time and a half and double time. And then it will go through each shoot day and process all of your overtime into the invoice. And then it will go through and do your gear. And your gear, it will list the days that you use the gear on. And then the units are 4 because you use that on 4 dates, and then the price per day, and then your total. And then it will do similar thing for mileage, where it will say you charged mileage for those 2 days, and then that was shoot day 2. So that's how much mileage you charged there, which was, 152. And then on shoot day 3, you charge that. And that's kind of it. You can essentially go send and you're done. Pretty cool. Now, there's a few little things I just want to show you that are a little bit more advanced that give you some options for how all of this will show up. So in Crew Call, if you tap and hold on here and then you press Create Document and you go over to CSV, they've got 3 options: account code, tax rate, and product description. So account code is essentially preset to 200, which in Xero, you can see here, it aligns to sales 200. Now you can make all sorts of different account codes, other revenues 260, interest incomes 270. If you want to change that, all you need to do is select custom and then change this to 270 in Crew Call. And then next time you import all of this, instead of saying sales account, it will use other revenue, interest income, because I've put in 270. The other thing that you may want to change is your tax rate. So if you click here, and it will call GST on income. Now, if you look over here, you can see GST on income is your tax rate. This is set up as an Australian company, so you basically have 3 options, these 3. Now, if you want to change that, you can click on presets here, and I've built in a whole bunch of presets for Australia, and then all the Canadian presets, and we've got Great Britain presets, New Zealand and US presets. Or if you have something different, you can change it to custom and type in whatever you like. The last option is probably the most noteworthy, which is this product description. So you can see here that it says first AC normal, which is your item code. And you've got your description, which is shoot day 1, and then your times. Now this works really great when you're generating an invoice like this, and it says item code, first AC, and then the description. But Xero's default setting is over in invoice settings is actually, it's got this thing called show item code. And if that's ticked off, which Xero has by default, and I go here and I preview an invoice, it will generate an invoice, but it won't show first AC. It'll just say shoot day 1, etc., etc. So I can't see that was for the first AC. So that's what this option is for. So if I went here and I went delete, just to clear this invoice out, and then I change this to be item code and description, and then I created a new CSV. I'm going to change the name of this one to A, and I'm going to call this one B. So B is the new one which we just created here. So now if I import a CSV, select a Xero and select browse, and I import the B, it will import correctly, but it will set the description to be slightly different. So it's still importing that, and because I imported those items before, they're still all there. It's just changing the description. So I hit complete import, and now I've got that same invoice, and it says first AC up here, but it's also put it in the description. So now if I go preview, it's basically going to list first AC, shoot day 1, then your times. Overtime 1.5, shoot day 1, then your times. Now that will work if your invoice template is set to the default, which is show item code to off. But I recommend putting show item code to on because I think it looks better, and saving that, and that will set up your template. Now when I go over here and I go preview, because I've imported it with the setting in Crew Call saying item code and description, I will get duplicates, item code and description. So to fix that, I will essentially just delete this invoice and import number A, which is that one. Now, the only other thing that I wanted to show you is just a little bit of how this works. So if I go and open up this file here, you can see that this is the CSV. So it lists the production company, lists the invoice number. Now this invoice number is just generated based on, it gives it a unique identifier. Basically, from CrewCall it will give you an identifier so that each job that you bring in will have its own individual invoice number. You can always change this later up here if you like. You can change it to whatever you like as your invoice number. And then you'll go through and you'll see the reference, which is the job name, and then it'll set the invoice date to today, which is when you create the invoice. It'll set the due date to be 30 days time, and then it will go through and it will list all of your items one by one. And then you've basically got the quantity and you've got how much each cost, and then you have your account code and your tax type. And that's basically it. If you use different account codes for different items, so you might use account code 200 for labor, and then you might go, okay, my gear uses 260. If you want those to be different, you're going to have to change them in here for the time being. But if that's a feature that you think you're going to use, let me know, because I can build an option into here that basically says labor account code, equipment account code, and mileage account code, so you can set it up all differently. But yeah, so that's basically the CSV import option into Xero. It just works very quickly and it lets you log your times in CrewCall, log your equipment in CrewCall, log your mileage in CrewCall, and get it over to Xero quick smart. Hope you found this helpful, and if you've got any questions, please let me know. Thanks.